The Fable of the Fox and Cat is a interesting story about the perils of having too much choice. So a fox was boasting to a cat about how he had many ways to escape any kind of danger, and the cat was saying, well, he only has one. Just as he was boasting about it, a pack of hounds appears, and the cat runs up a nearby tree and says to the fox, well, that was my one way of escaping, what's your escape route? And the fox, because he'd said he had so many potential ways to evade predators, ends up procrastinating over which decision to make, and as he's choosing his escape method, he then gets torn apart by the dogs, and the cat sort of smugly says, you know, better to have one sure way of doing it than 1,000 that you're not quite sure of. Hi, I'm Phil Whitby, and this is the next video in my series on biases in business, and this one is on choice overload. So choice overload has lots of different names. So it can be overchoice, analysis paralysis, or choice paradox. So the idea is that when you're presented with multiple choices, you will be overwhelmed by all the choices and therefore sort of be paralyzed and not actually make any kind of decision. So these kinds of choices or multiple choices that can be overwhelming can easily be seen in places like supermarkets or Starbucks or anywhere where you actually go to buy something. When I used to work in Starbucks years ago, we'd get, especially when it was just new in the country, we'd get a lot of customers just coming up and throwing their brow for a while at the menu, and then they'd say, I just want a coffee. You know, the baristas were trained to kind of try and gently walk them through the options, but often that would meet with people's even more sort of like anger, although most would relent eventually and then choose a venti tall latte with 16 sugars or whatever. Now, the problem with choice overload is that a lot of studies or meta-studies have demonstrated that there isn't really a big effect. Now, I think part of the misunderstanding about choice overload is that people don't abstain from making a choice when presented with lots of choices. They just make a choice that to them feels like the easiest choice or the most appropriate choice, but is often one that is based on like mere exposure effect or just advertisement, whatever they've seen most recently, or they appear or they feel like they trust the most, they will then buy. So it doesn't really lead to this kind of paralysis, but it does lead to a different kind of bias coming in. I mean, nobody could argue that Tesco's and Starbucks are wildly successful in their area, in their markets. So being presented with a lot of choices is obviously an effective tool for those companies. So giving customers 15 different options for paper towels clearly has a benefit for Tesco and for the companies that will shelf their products in Tesco. What's happening is that I think I will go through a number of mental gymnastics to try and calculate the best price to performance ratio for all the available products. So I'll think about the times that I've used, say, paper towels, and I've bought the really cheap ones, and they've literally not even been able to manage to wipe up a drop without becoming soggy and unusable. And then I've thought about the times I bought the most expensive products for paper towels, and they've been fantastic but vastly overpriced. So this kind of like mental energy is expended in trying to find this perfect balance. When you're given too many options, it can be too difficult, and to get the perfect ratio. And if you're doing this for every single product purchase in the supermarket, there will be a point where you reach something that is called decision fatigue. And now decision fatigue is where after making a series of important decisions, you can't really do it anymore, so you make the most easy or just choose almost randomly. One characteristic of decision fatigue is that people tend to not be able to restrain their inner desires from coming out. So you'll find that people will buy more sugary, fatty products when they are suffering from decision fatigue. And in fact, decision fatigue has even been blamed for lots of, let's say, powerful people's indiscretions that occur specifically in night times, because they've had a long, hard day making decisions, and so denying themselves these desirable things becomes a lot harder at the end of the day, especially when they've had something like alcohol, which would be an inhibition remover. So this video isn't really about how to avoid late night indiscretions because you're a powerful businessman. It's really about choosing what and how to think about some decisions. I mean, if you're going to a supermarket with a principle such as I'm going to get the cheapest things possible all the time, and you adhere to that principle, then you may be able to go for the value items, which coincidentally happens to be the supermarket's own brand items, which are often made in the same factory as the high brand items anyway. But the key is, if you have a principle and then you work by that principle, it's more of a shortcut to making those decisions. If you're constantly revising and trying to come together and reach a compromise at every single step of that supermarket, you're going to end up making the wrong decisions closer to the beginning than you realise. And if you're not careful about how, the principle by which you make those decisions, if you're not careful about applying that, then the people that win in the end are the people that are presenting you with the choices. So if you're trying to buy a product and you're overwhelmed with choice all the time, it's likely that the supermarket or the big brands are going to win, because their option will be the one that most people go for when people suffer from decision fatigue. And this very reason that supermarkets will have the higher sugar, higher fat items near the till, where you're at the end of your shopping journey, where you've made multiple decisions, you've had choice overload the entire time, so your willpower for resisting those sorts of things is massively reduced. So anything they dangle in front of you is now that could appeal to you, you're much more likely to go for. And I've also noticed in some supermarkets they have mobile phone stalls outside the tills as well, and other products. You'll be more likely to be lured in because your willpower has been diminished. Another lesson could be that you don't need to micromanage so much, because when it comes to the big decisions, you will be suffering from decision fatigue. So good delegation would be really important for making sure that you don't make what is the most agreeable decision to the person who's giving you the choice, but you make the right decision that is good for your company and for yourself. My name's Whitby. I hope you've enjoyed this video on choice overload and decision fatigue. See you next time.